Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So the Cleveland Browns officially introduced Todd Monken today, and I thought that this would be an important day, an important press conferences to really lock in on. So I'm going to be very detailed in this video. There's going to be a lot of clips back to the press conferences. And the reason that is because my questions about this hire aren't about Todd Monken's resume, right? You know, if they would have hired, Shieldhouse or something like that, then you have to get into the questions about the resume and everything else like that. But it's really about the process. So, yeah, what Todd had to say was important. And there's a couple clips in here from Todd for sure. But it's really more like, hey, what's Andrew saying? What's Jimmy Haslam saying? Does Jimmy Haslam speak on this? Which he did. And are they saying the same things? Because my big concern is the process. Was the process followed in order to get the Todd Monken? Was he the final result of a process here? Because for me, that's the main thing that matters with a head coach hire in general. Again, I say this all the time, and I want this to be completely clear. I don't care about what name they ended up hiring. I care more about the process that got them to the name, because that's going to matter much more. So I want to know that the process was clean, that there was no disagreement, or if there was disagreement, it was settled at some point, and that ownership is behind this hire as much as the general manager is behind this hire. Because if it's just Andrew Berry that wants him there, it's not going to work. If it's just Jimmy Haslam that wants him there, it's not going to work. It has to be both of those guys willing to put their name on this hire. So that's one of the most important things. That's why I'm going to spend so much time on the Andrew Berry part, and especially the Jimmy Haslam part, because that's the guy we got the questions about. I thought Todd Monken was good here. I'll get into my overall thoughts at the end of the video, but that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be a in-depth breakdown of the press conferences, all three of them that we saw today, with clips involved. So stay tuned for that. But also, if you're interested in picks for the Super Bowl, have my Tuesday picks in. So let's check that out with my sponsor, Sleeper. So it's Super Bowl week, and I think a fun thing to do with the Sleeper app would be to do at least 5 days of 5 different slips for picks on Sleeper. So every day you watch my channel, I'm going to be going over a different themed pick list that I have in for the Super Bowl. Sometimes you just want to go crazy, and what's a better day to go crazy than Tuesday? So I have my picks in for Tuesday. These are the craziest ones. This is a $5 slip that can win you $2,869 if I am correct about everything that hits here. Obviously, it's a bit far-fetched, but I think this has a chance to happen here. Got Boye Mafe getting a sack in the game, or at least over a half a sack. I'm got Jackson Smith and Jigba scoring the first touchdown of the game, George Ilani getting over 40 rushing yards, and then Harold Landry also getting a sack. If I'm right on all of this, I might be able to take an extra vacation. We'll see what happens, but if you want to join in all the fun, make sure you join Sleeper, where you can get 100% a match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. So make sure you join Worst Take and have that fun there. Join the Sleeper app. Prove to your friends you know ball. Peace. Okay, let's start with Andrew Berry. The one thing I thought was very clear from this press conference was that this was a decision Andrew Berry is willing to take credit for in the public eye, right? He was out front. He was very complimentary of Todd Monken. He verbatim said that this is the guy who stood out amongst all of the people that they interviewed. This seems like this is who Andrew Berry wanted. Let's listen to him talk about this at the beginning of his press conference.
Coming out of 2025, the first thing we wanted to do is say, okay, like where are we from a team standpoint? Where are we from a roster standpoint? And we looked at it and we said, hey, we're coming out of 2025. We have the 8th youngest defense in terms of experience, a group that's very complete at all 3 levels and that we feel really good about. On the offensive side of the ball, we looked and we felt like we had a number of young, pillar cornerstone pieces, but we envision a world where that side of the ball is going to have pretty significant turnover over the next several months. And then from a resource standpoint, we looked at the team and said we're flush with draft resources entering this offseason, as well as the appropriate amount of flexibility from a financial perspective. So as we looked at everything and we thought about what we needed from our head coach, particularly in this phase, the first thing we actually looked at is we wanted someone who could lead, develop, and grow a young team. Because quite frankly, we're probably going to be, if not the youngest, one of the youngest teams in football in 2026. The second thing that we wanted, certainly in the short term, was a coach, didn't matter the background, that had a very strong and adaptable offensive plan, given the amount of turnover we're going to have on that side of the ball, both in terms of personnel, scheme, you name it. In addition to that very specific problem, we were looking at individuals that had 4 key attributes. The first is something that we categorize as global intelligence. So that's not just cognitive ability or IQ, that's EQ and football acumen as well. The second is something that we term CEO leadership. So that's someone who has the ability to function at what we would call 30,000 feet, as well as the tactical level at ground level. The third, we wanted someone who had a demonstrated track record of innovation where they've been. And then the fourth, we wanted someone who had the characteristics of collaboration, given the head coaching position touches so many different areas in football operations in the modern day game. So what we did to assess, all of those characteristics with many of the fine coaches we met with, we looked at their performance track record, where they've been throughout all their career, how their units have done. We did a number of reference calls throughout people who had been in direct working relationship with the candidates throughout all stops of their career. We did testing, we did work samples, and we also did the interview. And we combined all of that information to make a good decision about who would serve us best, who would serve the organization best with the problem that we're trying to attack with where our team is currently. And when we did that, Todd stood head and shoulders above the rest. Todd's really, really, really unique. If you look at his history, his career history, this is a coach who has had high-level, innovative, adaptable offenses at both the pro and college level. Doesn't matter the personnel, didn't matter the quarterbacks, didn't matter what he inherited. He always found a way to have high-level and productive units. It became very apparent in everybody that we talked to about Todd how strong he was working and developing with young players. I think that's one of the beauties of Todd's experience is he does have pro and college experience as a coach, and that transfers in terms of how he leads and grows young players. The third, the mentors that he's worked for, most recently Kirby Smart and John Harbaugh, arguably the best in the business in pro and college, and the lessons that Todd has learned and applied from those coaches has been outstanding. And then the last thing is he understands the job. The work that he did at Southern Miss, inheriting a program at its historical nadir, turning it around with few resources, shows he has the leadership, the gumption, and the resourcefulness to do this job at any level. So for us, we felt like he fit us like a glove. And we are so excited to have him and his family in Cleveland. I guess I should say back to Cleveland, Todd.
Oh, I thought that was a pretty insightful opening from Andrew Berry, actually. I thought this was press conference, all three of them were pretty insightful. I thought all three guys gave some pretty insightful quotes about the process and what's going to happen going forward. I thought Andrew Berry was probably, uncharacteristically, the most transparent of all the three people who spoke, because Andrew Berry is basically laying it bare. This is going to be a young team. They aren't in a position where they feel like they're in a win now mode, right? He has a quote later on in the day that says, where he's like, we're not going to sign guys in their mid-30s to put us over the hump. And he keeps talking about where the team is in their life cycle. It's clear he thinks they're early in their life cycle. He's being transparent about where they are as a team and why Todd Monken made sense for them, right? He thinks that Todd can lead a young team and have an adaptable offensive plan. I think his work at Georgia is probably the most illuminating on that. Todd Monken, obviously, Georgia's going to be a young team, a bunch of young players on that Georgia team. They went to back-to-back championships. and an adaptable offensive plan, right? Remember, Georgia, it was supposed to be JT Daniels that was going to be starting quarterback over there, and it ended up being Stetson Bennett. He had to adapt to that plan on the fly. Then he gave his 4 key attributes, right? EQ, CEO leadership ability. He mentioned multiple times being able to lead from 50,000 feet above, a track record of innovation, and in collaboration. When he gave these attributes, one thing became clear to me. I think there was a level of legit discomfort amongst everybody in the committee about the lack of experience that Nate Shieldhouse had and the lack of experience that Grant Udinski had, right? We're talking about Grant Udinski, 1 year as an offensive coordinator, not really calling plays, and like 6 years of NFL experience, but like 4 of those years, he's an assistant to a position coach. Nate Shieldhouse, again, not a ton of NFL experience. I think only 2 seasons of NFL experience. I think that was something that bothered them. Now, obviously, I think Shieldhouse had the upper hand because Shieldhouse, what he did not have in NFL experience, he did have in college experience, and it did seem from him talking about Monken's experience at Southern Miss that they valued college experience. Now it might be, and even college experience is not really at like a tier 1A program like Georgia. So that's something that I think kind of makes how it unfolded, right? When Udinski wasn't really in the final running for the coaches reportedly. That kind of makes sense now that they've kind of laid out those attributes. And again, he said Todd stood head and shoulders above the rest as far as his resume goes. Andrew has put his name on this hire. There's no doubt after this press conference that this is a Andrew Berry hire, and that this is something that Andrew wanted to do. There's going to be no plausible deniability here, right? This did not seem like Andrew was being forced hostage to announce Todd Monken or that Jimmy told him to hire Todd Monken. I know that people are going to create conspiracies because this is the Browns and Jimmy Haslam we're talking about, but I don't think there's a legitimate conspiracy here. I think this is straight up. They just hired Todd Monken, and Andrew Berry was very okay with hiring Todd Monken. It also goes to you, when it comes to covering Andrew Berry, the biggest lesson I've learned over the years is you have better luck reading tea leaves than you do reading sources, right? Because you'll hear all kind of source stuff about Andrew Berry and what the Browns are going to do front office-wise. It's usually all bullshit. Or not bullshit, but it's usually all not a clear picture of what's going on. I don't believe very many sources I hear behind the scenes about Andrew Berry, and I'm at that point now. Because the tea leaves would have told you Todd Monken made sense, because you look at the offensive background, what the Browns need to fix, Todd Monken made sense. The sources were telling you Todd Monken wasn't in it, which is the exact opposite of what happened here. So keep that in mind whenever it comes to anything front office related for the Cleveland Browns. Lockdown building, man. Like lockdown building. We went through this with Travis Hunter. This is the second time. I've learned my lesson, me personally. I wonder if the rest of the landscape has either. Let's get into the Todd Monken part of the press conference. I thought Todd was pretty good in his presser, as good as you can be in such an environment, right? Obviously, this isn't going to matter for Sundays, but, I thought he was I think it was a more transparent tone from him, a more direct tone than we're used to from hearing from the head coach, right? For better or worse, Kevin Stefanski is not the most direct guy in the world and won't give you a direct answer, right? Like, for example, when they asked Todd, will he call the plays? This is how Todd answered.
Todd, I got 2 quick ones for you. Are you going to call the plays?
Yes.
And then you mentioned 95 a couple of times.
Right, we remember how Kevin answered these questions, where it'd be very much roundabout. Not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying Todd clearly has a different approach to how he answers questions here. He also got asked a question about Shedeur Sanders, where Shedeur, will he be factored in basically as QB1? Mary Kay asked that question. Here's the answer that Todd gave.
Mary Kay Cabot, Cleveland.com, Cleveland Plain Dealer. Well, I guess I'll start right off the bat with the question probably everybody wants to know. Will you head into this offseason with Shedeur Sanders as your QB1? And if not, what is your approach to the whole quarterback situation as you move into your new job?
Well, I think like any position on the team, that's still to be determined. Am I excited about Shador? Am I excited about all the quarterbacks in the room? Am I excited to coach this football team? Absolutely. I can't wait for them to get back and for us to get started.
Very non-committal today on any of the quarterbacks on the roster, which I expected, right? Andrew Berry talked about they expect a ton of turnover on the roster offensively. That says a lot there, right? They talked about how important the quarterback position was, but did not have any praise of any of the individual quarterbacks in the room. And then when Jimmy was answering a question, they asked him, and I'll put this in the Jimmy part, part of Todd's hire was his ability to find a quarterback. And is Jimmy highly confident in that ability? And Jimmy said yes. And I think that's significant because why would you care about how good Todd's ability is to find a quarterback if you think he already got one on the roster? If you got to find a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback, basically, right? So that kind of tells you where they're at. They don't think they have a quarterback on the roster. They're going to continue to look for a quarterback and search for a quarterback. If one emerges, then great. But part of Todd being hired was that they want to find an answer at quarterback, and they think Todd can identify those things. So we'll see what happens at the quarterback position. I think there's going to be a lot of movement here, especially when the new league year starts. We'll see what that movement results into. I thought Todd had a great answer here when it comes to the culture of accountability.
I think you have to hold the players accountable for what they say their dreams and aspirations are. And you have to find out what really do you want individually with your career, and then what do you want collectively as a team. And all you're doing is holding them to what their goals and aspirations are, like people did for me. I am who I am because my parents did that for me. They didn't do that to me. They did that for me. And that's the way I go about it, is I think everybody likes honesty till they don't like what's said to them honestly. And I'm the same way. I'm no different. I like being stroked in a good way. I'm no different. I don't like the other side of it. But that's how I've gotten a lot better. And the people that love you the most, they're going to be honest with you. But all it is finding out what are your dreams and aspirations, and then let's fight like hell to achieve them.
Here's why I think this is a great answer, right? You'll hear a lot of people yell about accountability on the internet about all sorts of things, but very rarely do people actually understand what accountability is. You can't hold somebody accountable if you're a football coach or a person in general if that person doesn't consent to being held accountable, right? You can yell about accountability all you want, but if you can't get the person you want to be accountable to consent to being held accountable, then you can't hold anybody accountable. You can try to dominate them. You can try to yell at them. You can try to get them fired, but you can't truly hold somebody accountable if they're not willing to be held accountable. And I think what Todd said there, where he's like, hey, I want to hold you accountable to your own goals. That's referencing that. That's referencing an understanding of what it means to be held accountable. He can't just tell somebody, I want you to do this and hold somebody accountable to that. He has to figure out what that person wants to achieve and then hold that person accountable to what they want to achieve. So by it being their own goal, that person has already accepted the accountability, accepted or consented to the accountability there. You'll hear people use this phrase a lot. Very rarely are the people using this phrase people who understand this phrase. I think in that one answer, Todd Monken demonstrated that he not only prioritizes holding somebody accountable, he understands how that works. And it's not just another fucking buzzword for him. Thought that was a great answer. It's going to fly under the radar for most people, but I think that answer right there, that made me feel real good about the Todd Monken hire, because I'm like, okay, this guy gets it. There was an answer about Jim Schwartz here that also made me feel like, okay, Todd gets it here. This was the answer about Jim Schwartz and how they're going to move going forward with the defense.
Well, first off, my anticipation is we're not going to change the system. Very difficult to go against. I'm not planning on changing the system. We're built for the system that they're in currently. And I'm not going to get into staffing because that's not at this time to get into that. But they can be rest assured that we're going to keep the same system. We're still going to let them attack. We're still going to let them play free. I can't see any other way. They're a big reason why I took this job. The defensive players. I didn't take this job because of Jim Schwartz. I have a lot of respect for Jim Schwartz, but as I would hope he has for me. But I took it because of the players that are here, the ownership, Andrew Barry, and the ability to build this roster from the ground up on the offensive side. So, and I said this to the other guys. I didn't think I'd say it, but I'm going to say it. When I was preparing for the Cleveland Browns, I wasn't trying to chip Jim Schwartz. I was chipping Myles Garrett. And when I was sliding a protection to the outside backers or Grant Delpit that were blitzing off the edge, I was sliding the protection of the players. And when I was worried about throwing to the right against Denzel Ward or Tyson Campbell to the left, that's who I was worried about throwing at.
Yeah, you go through a search process, and I think we started out with like 20, 25 candidates. I think we interviewed 9. I might be off by 1 there. And a search is, it's a little bit like this. It's a little bit of a roller coaster. Somebody drops out, somebody comes in. You get better references or better test results on someone or worse, so it's a little bit of a roller coaster. I would say Todd was at the top of the list the entire time. I think our search lasted 20 days, and I'd say he was in leading the pack or in the front pack the whole time, Terry.
Hey, Jimmy, what did you learn on your other coaching searches that affected you picking?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't pick him. Okay, we picked him. All right, but I say that we, capital we, and I want to thank Andrew and our team in terms of process. And process is extremely important in these searches because they're very emotional. There are all kinds of information out there, and all due respect, a lot of it not accurate. And so by having an organized, disciplined process, which we stuck to, and I think the first coach, whoever hires the first coach or the second coach is not necessarily the winner. 2 years from now, nobody will remember whether Todd was the 7th or 8th coach hired, whatever he was. What's count is, did we get the right guy? And I think our team laid out a good process, and I think we were disciplined throughout that process the entire time, up to last Wednesday when we announced Todd as our head coach.
So, again, I thought this answer and the answer of Jimmy and Andrew in these press conferences really did illuminate one of the bigger questions we had about the process. Was this whole thing oriented to keep Jim Schwartz? I don't think that's the case. What I do think is true is something that I don't really have a problem with, which is the Browns wanted to maintain a certain style of defense, right? So let's say Shieldhouse in his interview, if he wanted to bring in somebody who was going to maintain the 4-3 downhill attack, man-on-man kind of style of defense that the Browns have been stocking for the last 5 years, then I think he would have that wouldn't have become an issue for him if that even got to the point where that was an issue. I don't think it was specifically, you got to keep Jim Schwartz. It was, hey, we have a system in place defensively, like most teams do, that we want to keep intact. It's no different than what the Falcons wanted to do while keeping the defense that they inherited from the Raheem Morris system with their defensive coordinator. It's no different than what the Ravens are doing right now by bringing in people who can maintain their defensive identity that they've stuck to since they were born as a franchise in '96. It's the same philosophy that Pittsburgh is likely to follow with defense, right? Where they're going to be the same thing defensively that they've always been. That makes it a lot more understandable. The Browns' defensive identity is being a 4-3 attacking team that allows their pass rushers to get at the quarterback. I don't see the problem with that. It wasn't really about keeping Jim Schwartz. It was about keeping that style of defense as what the Browns wanted to do. And if somebody wanted to come in and change that, that was going to be a non-starter. But that makes sense. If we were holding this whole process hostage because of Jim Schwartz, that's a bad move. But if you're saying to these guys, this is what I want to do defensively. This is the identity of the Cleveland Browns when we have the best defensive player in football and they want to change that, then it makes you want to reconsider whether those people really have the ability that you want to manage a team, because why would you fix something that's not broken? Like the philosophy of the Browns defense, which clearly is not broken, not even close to broken. So yeah, I thought that third Jim Schwartz answer was like probably the right answer there, right? Like he's like, hey, we got Myles Garrett, we got these guys, we know what they work well in. We can bring in somebody else who can run this defense, but this is the kind of defense that we want to run. So schematically, things aren't going to change. Who's running it might change, but it's going to be the same style of defense. And I appreciate that answer there and that transparency from Todd Monken. He also talked about a lot of other things. If you want to go watch the full press conference, how he likes a challenge, how he left Georgia specifically to become a head coach, and what he believes the Todd Monken offense should look like under him and what the expectations are. He wasn't specific enough with those answers for me to feel like it's necessary to put him in a video like this, which is probably going to be pretty long. But let's jump to the Jimmy Haslam portion of this, which I thought, and look, I'm a known critic of Jimmy Haslam and billionaire sports team owners in general. I have a long-term stance that I am never going to get off of, more than likely, that all of them stink at their job, right? They're just not qualified to have the power that they have, because it's simple. You don't get billions of dollars because you had a good career in football. That being said, all my criticisms of Jimmy, I thought Jimmy came off good today. I thought this was a good showing from Jimmy in the press. He talked about why he liked Todd Monken and, the coaching search, why they picked him, and if they stuck to the process. Here was his answer here.
It was obvious we were looking for a strong leader, someone who would hold the players accountable, someone who was tough, had a great work ethic, and quite frankly had experience. And when you combine that with the fact that he's won with the following quarterbacks, Nick Mullins, Jameis Winston, Stetson Bennett IV, and Lamar Jackson, all of whom have entirely different skill sets, and he's won running the ball, he's run passing the ball, made Todd a really attractive candidate. So excited to have him in the building. I think he's off to a good start building and rebuilding the staff, and I really, truly believe that good things are ahead.
There was his answer about Todd's ability to find a quarterback. He mentioned multiple times, right? I thought this was interesting from Jimmy, that one of the selling points with Todd Monken was he won with Nick Mullins at Southern Miss, and then he won with Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay, and then he won with Lamar Jackson. He didn't really go to Lamar, but he really focused on some of the more mediocre names at quarterbacks that he won with. And I think that speaks to Jimmy believes that he can elevate quarterback play at the position to get it to a place to where it's not disastrous. Here was his answer there.
Jimmy, you talked about his experience with the quarterbacks, and obviously Andrew before had mentioned whoever you guys hired as head coach would have a lot of input there. How confident are you with Todd's experience that he can help give a long-term answer at that position?
Highly confident. Now Andrew's got to help him. We need players, but I'm highly confident.
And again, I would like to point out, you don't have to find a quarterback if you think you already have one. So seems clear to me that the Browns do not feel like they have a quarterback, and that they will be aggressive in the market to find an answer at the quarterback position. All right, the next one, and I thought this was actually a legitimately great answer from Jimmy Haslam. I know, right? But he was asked why the Browns, he was asked about the process that the Browns have, right? The Browns have a unique process. They ask guys to do more than just the interview. Why is it that the Browns have what many people call a convoluted process? I thought Jimmy answered this great. Here's his answer.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful to just weight everything on the interview, okay? Because sometimes strong personalities sell better than other personalities. And I think when we put a lot of confidence in references, and we probably had 30 references on everybody, and obviously you put more confidence in some references by how high they are up the totem pole, okay? So I think that's important. I think the testing we put them through is important, the body of work, and then the interview. And those are the four things we didn't short circuit, everybody did the same, and I think it served us.
Let's add some more insight to that question by linking in Andrew Berry's answer on this as well.
I have an opener for you, so I'll let you guys just.
Andrew, what's been made of the process? And can you expand a little bit more on it maybe, and just the uniqueness of it compared to the way other organizations do it?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the way that other organizations do it, Chris. I guess when we look at the head coaching position, like it's a lot like if you were, in the business world, you're hiring a CEO or a COO, right? This is a position that, across the league you may spend, call it 50 to 100 million on the hire, plus another 75 million on their staff, plus the impact that they have on the organization. And there has to be a level of thoughtfulness when you're going through that hiring process. So the way that we looked at it is okay, generally speaking, you have a 4-week period to make really a monumental hire for the organization, something that can alter your path, alter your strategic direction in a very positive way, or if you make the wrong hire, a very negative way. And so the way we went through the process is, one, we wanted to define, okay, what are we asking this individual to do in this phase of our team's life cycle? Two, what are the characteristics and attributes that we're seeking that would allow them to be successful? And then three, how are we actually going to measure that? And the way we looked at it was, number one, it's performance, right? It's a performance-based business. We want someone with a good track record. We want to know what it was like working with these individuals from the people who have been with them over a long period of time. And then we also wanted to test their critical thinking skills in role-specific areas, and that's what the interview process was. That's what the the assessments were, and the work sample. So it was simple like that. That guided our interviews. I know a lot of teams, they may do it the flip way, where they'll interview to funnel. We did a lot of research on the front end to guide who we would actually even submit a slip for, and then use additional parts of the process, the interview process, to ultimately arrive at a result.
Andrew.
I said this, I think, right when the news broke, where people were freaking out about this, I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't understand why so many people had a problem with it. I thought it was more or less people's ignorance about how much goes into a head coaching interview to begin with, because it seems like people's impression was that you just show up in a nice suit, you interview for 20 minutes, and then you leave like you're trying to get a job at fucking Chick-fil-A. And no disrespect to Chick-fil-A, I understand that the interview process is much more detailed at Chick-fil-A than what I just described, right? That is a job at McDonald's, what you would have to do to get that job. I think I even used this exact example that Andrew Berry used, right? If you're going to hire a COO or a CFO, somebody's going to be third in your organization when it comes to football operations, you want that to be a thorough process. You don't want that to be reliant on vibes and just the interview. You want data behind that hire. You want a process behind that hire. So all of this made me feel better about how this went down. It makes me more confident that Todd's going to be successful in Cleveland. Not confident, but more confident in Todd, right? I'm saying I feel much better about Todd's ability to be successful. Will he be successful? We'll find out, right? Andrew Berry's pretty much telling you they're not expecting to be a Super Bowl contender this year. So, there's definitely going to be that part of it. They also asked a Watson question to Jimmy Haslam, and Watson, basically, he was like, it's Todd's call. We could play the clip. We'll play the clip.
And then the Deshaun Watson question is, do you guys feel like if Deshaun Watson is healthy, you have a potentially 3-time Pro Bowl caliber quarterback to offer to Todd Monken as he evaluates your quarterback room?
Yeah, I think that's, somebody asked a question about quarterback today, and I think Todd knows a little bit from playing us, but really, he's an offensive coach, and he'll start looking at that, and that'll be Todd's call. We have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and we'll let Todd give us advice, and he and Andrew will work from there.
Yeah, basically, he said, I don't think they really have a plan for Deshaun Watson. I don't think they care. Again, Deshaun Watson is just so physically, at this point, cooked. And I know people have their negative opinions of other quarterbacks you could bring in, but Deshaun Watson has had a throwing shoulder injury and 2 Achilles tears. That's not just cooked. Also, keep in mind, he hasn't played football in the last 5 years. He's played maybe 1 season worth of football. That's crazy. He is probably the most cooked you could be. I think that Phillip Rivers is probably less cooked than him. at this point. Like, he just hasn't played enough football. He's been injured. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it with Deshaun. If Deshaun comes out there in training camp and he's lighting it up, I might strike a different tune. But until I see that, I don't care about what's going on with Deshaun Watson. It seems like that is the case with the Cleveland Browns as well. All in all, these press conferences did exactly what they were supposed to do, right? They bring in these press conferences, they have these guys speak, so you feel better about the process, so you feel like there is a uniform message going on in the building, and that this is who they wanted to hire. And I think they achieved all three of those things today. Will that win them games in September? Probably not. But I think this makes you feel better about how they're making decisions, the process behind it, and good process will win them games in September. So I would say I leave this press conference feeling better about the hire than I did coming in, and I think that is a successful presser. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. You guys have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.